I'm Professor Stephen Coleman, and I've spent many years researching and writing about political communication. I'm interested in how politicians speak to us, how we speak to them, and what we do to each other. In this episode, I'll be talking to Professor Gunn Enli from the University of Oslo about what political authenticity means in an age of artificial intelligence.
It has to do with playing the part of yourself or performing as yourself. There are strategies to seem more real, but the paradox is that you can't really play someone else. You have to be somewhat of an actor, but you also have to be true to yourself in the way that being authentic also have to do with being consistent.
I have only one thing to say. You turn if you want to. The ladies not for turning.
We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall never surrender.
We cannot afford 4 more years of this, Philadelphia. But the good news is, right now you can choose change.
And I want you all to know that we are fighting the fake news. It's fake, phony, fake.
The Sound of Politics with Professor Stephen Coleman.
At a time when so many politicians' speeches sound like they were written by an AI chatbot, which has searched a database of cliches to come up with the perfect replication of a robot running on a low battery, it's hardly surprising to learn that at least one British MP has recently decided to turn himself into an AI chatbot. Labour's Mark Sewards has worked alongside a startup AI firm to create a virtual representation of himself, using recordings of his own voice to allow people to ask for help with local issues or policy queries at any time of the day or night. The 35-year-old Leeds South West and Morley MP says the technology will allow people to access support, quote, 24/7, 365 days a year. How wonderful. I can imagine the scene. Hello, is that my MP? Yes, I'm your virtual MP. How can I help? Well, it's a bit of an emergency, actually. My landlord's just illegally evicted me and I've got nowhere to go tonight. It's snowing and I really don't want to sleep on the street. Thank you for explaining your problem. You should contact your local council housing office. I've just been there. They're closed and the emergency number they've given has a recorded message and my phone battery is running low and it's freezing out here. Thanks for telling me about that. You can contact me at any time of the day or night. Oh, that's good. So I'm contacting you right now. How can you help me? This incident will be passed on to the MP staff when they arrive in the office tomorrow morning. But I'm on the street now and it's snowing. Or maybe I'm wrong and the AI MP is capable of doing more than sounding like a glorified doctor's surgery voicemail. You are number 39 in the queue.
There is one call ahead of you. Your call should be answered within 1 minute.
I wonder whether the AI MP has political ambitions to become a minister one of these days. Then perhaps he, or she, or it, could have some real power. That was meant to be a joke, actually, but hold on. In Albania, the government has just appointed its first ever AI minister. No, not a minister to regulate AI, but a minister who is AI. The new minister is called Delia, which means sunshine in Albanian, and she's entirely made of pixels and code and powered by artificial intelligence. The Prime Minister of Albania, Edi Rama, who is a human being, incidentally, said that she will be responsible for all public procurement in the country. Let's be kind to ourselves and assume that this is some kind of an Albanian joke from the country that, after all, made Norman Wisdom its national hero. But it's not entirely a joke. In Singapore, an AI tool called Pair Chat is already being used to help government officials with, I quote, writing emails, conducting research, and generating ideas. It's the generating ideas that rather worries me. No, I'm not being a Luddite about this. I can see how governments needing to access and analyse vast amounts of policy-relevant data might benefit from using tools that are built precisely for such aggregation and collation. My concern is about giving these tools names and pretending that they're human beings or virtual human beings. I mean, I use a calculator to add up my tax returns, but I don't call it Jerry and think it's my buddy. In an age when voters say that they crave authentic political representation, AI politicians are not the most obvious proof that the political class gets the point. I'm thinking of contacting my virtual MP and asking him whether he is actually an authentic character. But I fear that he's programmed to say yes. In fact, I fear that he's programmed to say, if you want me to be authentic, just hold on a millisecond and I'll check out how to make myself precisely that. Now, if crazy people in California can fall in love with ChatGPT, crazier people could expect it to revitalise democracy. So my vote, for what it's worth, is for unartificial intelligence, with a side serving of unadulterated authenticity. So let's talk about this to Gunn Enli, who is Professor of Media and Communication at the University of Oslo. I mean, she's a real professor in the real city of Oslo. I checked her pulse before we talked.
Gunn, when somebody says to us that they're committed to representing our interests, how are we supposed to know as citizens, as voters, as people who don't read every single policy document that ever comes out, how are we supposed to know whether they are really on our side, whether they're telling the truth, whether they're the people we should place our faith in?
Well, we get to know our politicians mainly through the media. So it's a question of how do the politician come across in mediated contexts like television, radio, social media, because people are busy doing other things and not all of us are 100% interested in politics 24 hours a day. So I guess the mediated content is also very much happening fast in this day and age. So we have to, and I think many of us make up our minds fairly quickly about whether or not we trust a politician. And maybe we also are doing judgments of the politicians too fast and too much superficially based on how they come across in the media. And it's a mix of emotions and how we feel the politicians and the communication is appealing to us. So, but this is a complex question.
Is there, do you think, an inherent conflict between politicians acting strategically and at the same time presenting themselves authentically? Because many of them would say they're doing both. They would say, this is the real me. I'm doing everything I can to show you who I really am. But we know that they're surrounded by strategists and political strategy is the name of the game. Is there a tension there?
Yes, indeed, it's a tension and it's a paradox that being real and being authentic and being genuine, it can be constructed and it can be planned and also highly strategic. It has to do with playing the part of yourself or performing as yourself. There are strategies to seem more real. But the paradox is that you can't really play someone else. You have to be somewhat of an actor, but you also have to be true to yourself in the way that being authentic also have to do with being consistent and to come across as kind of if you say in one interview that my favorite band is the Beatles, and in the second interview you say Rolling Stones, and it doesn't really seem like you have an inner core. So you have to be also truthful to yourself in a way. You have to play on your own features. And I think that we recognize it when people play too much, when they are not real, when they are trying to be ordinary people, saying that they, for example, use the subway or eat at McDonald's, while we know that they are not, they're just doing it for the camera. They are just playing. So these are the authenticity scandals when politicians are caught doing something just for the strategic aspect of being authentic. So it's a really hard thing also for the politicians, that they have to kind of be themselves, but it has to be strategic and it has to be in line with their own self. But we know that they are also doing what they think will appeal to most voters.
That's very interesting. Now, the public's yearning for political authenticity, and I suppose it's increased in recent years, or at least the term authenticity is used much more, and the concept is something that seems to be part of the kind of demand element of politics. It's coincided with the rise of populism. Do you think that's a coincidence, or do you think that this great hunger for authenticity and the sense in which populist politicians seem to be satisfying that hunger is kind of logically connected?
I think, and I have also found in my research, that there are similarities between being authentic and performing as an authentic politician and being a populist politician. Because in populism, we see that the politicians, they want to be real. They want to be really real, like saying it like it really is. And for example, Donald Trump is very much seen as authentic because he speaks from the gut or from what he feels at the moment. And we know that not everything makes sense always, but it has become kind of his style. And also for other populist politicians, they can kind of use the authenticity argument of saying things that might be rude or might insult people, because they say, well, I only say what I think and I'm authentic and I'm real. So they like to make a contrast between themselves as genuine, authentic and real versus the more professional politicians who has traditionally been more polished, more like gentle in how they talk about groups of people, arguments. They are more elegant in a way, or more respectful, but the populists, they are more speaking straight from the heart or from the gut feeling, and that's in line with the common sense ideology of populism.
So does it, I mean, maybe this is too superficial an analysis on my part, but does it follow from this that if we want to save ourselves from the sort of simplicities and oversimplicities of populism, then maybe we've got to give up our craving for politicians being authentic and just accept that old-fashioned strategic politicians getting on with politics is less dangerous in a sense?
Yes, I think in a way we are falling into a trap if you said earlier that authenticity has increased in its importance or power, or how we talk about politics nowadays and I agree, it has increased and it has become more of a currency in politics to be authentic and real, and also it's connected to celebrity politics, that we want politicians who have kind of a fame and who appeals to that part of us as just interested in their private lives, or who they present themselves as in the media, rather than the real politics. The real politics might be more boring, and for most people they think that, well, the logic of politics, where things are discussed in long documents and you have to make compromises and you have to do all these things, that people are not. I think in an ideal world, what you say is correct. We should be more interested in the kind of old-fashioned ways of doing politics. But now we live in a media world, and without the media, I think it's difficult to get people engaged in politics, because we also want people to vote. We want people to be engaged in politics. And so it's a kind of a big dilemma. I think the yearning for authenticity is also a reaction to more and more professionalized politicians, which are polished by their consultants, advisors, etc. So we think, who are you really behind all this strategic, like people telling you what to do or say, or like you are a puppet, or you are not. I think the longing for authenticity will continue most likely, but we have to deal with it in a way that's not leading us straight down to populism all around.
Right. Now, we live in what has been referred to by a number of scholars as a confessional culture, one in which forms of deep moral accountability between people are regarded as somehow virtuous. Indeed, to be a righteous citizen or politician, it's expected that you will exhibit a kind of moral transparency. Is that good for democratic politics? I mean, is it important that we know the deep moral commitments of both private and public of our politicians?
Yeah, I think this is a question of whether or not the voters and the public feel that they relate to the politicians. And the very success of populist politicians is that they seem more relatable, and they talk like ordinary people, or they at least pretend to be ordinary people, even they are not. But the confessional culture of being real is also about being human, like saying, okay, I admit that I did a mistake once in my life. I did learn from that, and I have kind of my moral compass is still valid, but I had some difficult times. And if you confess, that's a very strong aspect of when you become friends with people, and to gain trust in new relationships with friends, colleagues, partners, then confessions are often very central in building trustful relations. So I think that's why it's a big part of politicians, or the culture we live in that sense, like admitting to being human and having flaws and weaknesses and having done mistakes.
Yeah. Let's say, Gunn, that a politician comes to you as a political communication expert, and they say to you, I want people to see the real me. I want to be authentic. I'm not kidding. I really do want to be authentic. What advice could you give me for being really, 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 really real?
I would, first of all, try to get to know the politician personally, get to know him or her as, for example, the speechwriters of Barack Obama. They knew him quite well. So in order to give advice, you should also, perhaps, I think it's quality to know the politicians and to see what you have to work with in a way. So, and then look for things that are, I would look for something that's unique for that person. And it could be that you are dyslexic or that you had some problems in your childhood.
Right.
Yeah. Or
Yeah.
look for something that you could sell in the public. But also, I would say that it's important to be being authentic is also be to use it in politics. It should be in line with your profile as a politician or what your ideology is. And for example, I think this is an important issue because I have myself experienced this. So it's sometimes important to relate to personal experiences and to kind of give a little bit of your own story to the public. And also it's about being consistent, and also sometimes if you want to come across as authentic, I think it's smart to seem like you are sometimes doing spontaneous things, like not everything is scripted in teleprompter style, and that you sometimes seem at least that you are saying what you're thinking at the moment, even though you're not. So you can just, you have to just prepare for some like scheduled or planned spontaneity.
Scheduled spontaneity. I like the concept. Finally, let me ask you this in the context of authenticity. How would you feel if I were to tell you that actually you've not just been interviewed by a real person called Stephen Coleman, but by an AI app? Now, incidentally, I can assure you I'm not an AI app, but what difference would it make or would it have made to this exchange?
That's such an interesting question. And I really would dislike it a lot. And I would not agree to do a podcast with an AI, Stephen. And it matters to me that you are a human and that you have a life and you have a, that you are a professor, of course, but also that you are a human being and that you are someone that I might meet someday. So, and I think that makes this conversation more valuable for me, and I think also for the listeners, a genuine conversation. But we are now living in a world where, the question of AI is also bringing us up to the next level of the question of authenticity and politicians and how we live in the world.
I think in a way we've at least got to the sort of the baseline of authenticity, which is you are human and I am human. And if we can establish that at the beginning, we've got somewhere. And maybe politicians haven't always even quite got to that stage where people are absolutely certain that they belong to the same species. So that may well be what a lot of this conversation has been about today. I found what you have to say really interesting, and your book, Mediated Authenticity, expands on that as well. So thank you very much for taking part today and for being a human.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for being a human. Let's stay that way.
I have only one thing to say. You turn if you want to. The ladies not for turning.
We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall never surrender.
We cannot afford 4 more years of this, Philadelphia. But the good news is, right now you can choose change.
And I want you all to know that we are fighting the fake news. It's fake, phony, fake.
The Sound of Politics with Professor Stephen Coleman.